his name came into the case only because the body of the man wounded at Houndsditch, known to the police as George Gardstein, was found in the room that Peter the Painter occupied at 59 Grove Street. The police issued his photos on a wanted poster with a bounty of £500 for his capture.
So, in trying to track down Peter the Painter, I know you've been to Latvia. How did you go about your research in Latvia?
Well, the thing that always puzzled me about the story was nobody had thought to look in Latvia for an answer to the identity of the individuals responsible. Everybody agreed that the authors of the robbery and the victims at Sidney Street were Latvian anarchists. And there's a certain amount of material in the London police files about them based on material seized from their addresses in a series of police raids. But none of the people who've written books until this time have thought to do any research in Latvia. So that's where I went in 1988, when Latvia was still part of the Soviet Union, to try and track down alternative sources of information to find out who these people were.
I think one of your first steps was you got an article in the Latvian newspapers, which...
No, that actually came later. I went to Latvia first as a tourist in 1988 and returned the next year under a business visa to do proper research. And the first tentative theory I developed, based on a number of similarities between Peter the Painter and a Latvian painter and revolutionary called Jedits Elias, was that Elias was Peter the Painter. Elias had been involved in a lot of operations during the 1905 revolution with Jānis Jāklis, and the similarities between Elias and Peter the Painter seemed too many to be coincidental. However, during my trip to Latvia in 1989, I discovered that, in fact, Elias was definitely not Peter the Painter, and that a man called Jānis Jāklis was.
I should say at this stage that Phil is holding up a photo of Jānis Jāklis, who bears an uncanny resemblance to David Beckham.
Yeah, the David Beckham photos were the mugshots of Jānis Jāklis when he was arrested in May 1904 at the age of 1901 and held in custody, charged with spreading seditious propaganda in Talsi in Latvia and Bobruisk in Belarusia. Immediately I saw those photographs, I realised that this is the same man that appeared on the wanted poster photos in London of Peter the Painter. And sure enough, in the same file, in what was then called the Museum of the Revolution and now today is the Latvian War Museum, was an original of one of the photographs on the wanted poster, on the back of which was written Jāklis in America as Thalbergs. So the police wanted poster photo was taken in 1907 in America, and Thalbergs was the maiden name of the mother of Jānis Jāklis, Margarita Thalberg.
So was that your sort of eureka moment? You thought I'd nailed the man?
It was. It was also the moment where all my theories collapsed and I had to start work again.
Do you believe you looked at the Czech archives in Latvia? Was that right?
Well, not the Czech archives. I did have some contact with the KGB in Riga in 1989 and even interviewed what they called a public relation officer of the KGB.
What a great job that must be.
The KGB headquarters in Riga, which is known as the Corner House, which reputedly was the highest building in Riga, because from the basement of the Corner House you could see Siberia. It's a Latvian joke.
Right. We'll leave that one to whittle through to our listeners.
I actually shelved this project in 1991 at around the time that the Soviet Union collapsed, and came back to the research in 2000. From 2003 to the present time, I've discovered, because of the easy access now that Latvia is independent, in the Latvian National Archives, a wealth of new material on Jānis Žāklis and the Latvian anarchists. The Latvian National Archives contains all of the original files of the Tsarist police of the period and the secret police, the Okranka, and is in fact the biggest such archive in the world outside Moscow.
And when you were looking at these archives, were people helpful? People in Latvia, I mean, was Peter the Painter big in Latvia? Had anyone heard of him?
Jānis Žāklis was a known figure in the history of the 1905 revolution in Latvia. But the history of Latvian anarchism and the career of Žāklis from the point he became an anarchist has been filleted from Latvian history of the period, because of course it was Soviet written history, and the Soviet version of the 1905 revolution tended to stress the activities of the Latvian Social Democrats and Social Democrats who subsequently became Bolsheviks and sided with the Soviet revolution. So I've had to piece together Soviet accounts that talk in passing about Žāklis with the Latvian police files on the Latvian anarchists, and piece things together.
So all this has led you to sort of place Sidney Street as just one perhaps minor episode in a much wider picture of revolutionary activity.
Yes, Sidney Street and the Tottenham outrage and the Motherwell robbery and a few other incidents really were actually footnotes to the career of Peter the Painter and the wider history of Latvian anarchism, being rare instances where expropriations went wrong, and because of that drawing public attention to the activities of Latvian anarchism. Most of the accounts of these people tend to treat the story as a matter of true crime or terrorism, but in fact what had happened was there had been a tremendous popular revolution in Latvia in 1905, which was bloodily suppressed at the end of 1905 and during the early months of 1906 by a massive wave of state terrorism, during which over 2,500 people was summarily executed, shot, hung, burnt in their homes. Over 4,500 other people deported to Siberia, and another 5,000 people fled abroad to Western Europe and America. At about the same period, at the end of 1905 up to the spring of 1906, a huge proportion of the main political party, revolutionary political party at the time, the Latvian Social Democracy, broke away from the party out of frustration with the party's trying to change from a policy of armed struggle against state terrorism to entering into the Russian Duma, and in fact left the party en masse and set up anarchist communist groups.
I think
and these anarchist communist groups effectively formed the armed resistance against the Russian state terrorism.
I think you've seen that you placed the Latvian revolution in you talked to me before as important as the anarchist movement in Russia and in Spain. That's quite a claim.
I think it was much more significant than the anarchist movement in Russia. The Latvian Revolution was a real mass movement. It began with a massacre when a peaceful demonstration was massacred by Cossacks. 73 people were shot dead, over 200 people killed. As a reaction against this, the workers' movement armed itself for protection, armed armed fighting organisations